Hello, everyone. It is Hope Gibbs, and this is Author Take the Wheel. We just had a little hiccup in our technical department here, but I am so excited that today we are going to be joined by the author who has taken over our Facebook account this week with her posts that are just, it brings me back to high school. It's just nostalgia at its best. And we are so lucky to have her here today to discuss her wonderful book called, and it's her debut, by the way, it's called Something Better. And we are joined by Joanna Monahan. Joanna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I cannot tell you how much this book took me back, and I devoured it. I think I read it in maybe 2 days.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, yay. I love it when people are like, I couldn't put it down. I was maybe yelling at Corinne a little bit, but it's still, I couldn't look away. So fantastic.
Well, I absolutely loved it. And before we get started, I just want to give everyone a little bit about your bio, about your background before we just dig in and start in on this book. Joanna lives in Raleigh, North Carolina with her husband, 2 children, and her hangry cat, which I'm going to ask you about this cat because I found out he went viral. Before she began writing women's fiction, Joanna worked in marketing and special events. She is a member of the WFWA, which is the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and the Author Guild. Her debut novel, Something Better, was one of page 158 Books Bestselling Fiction Titles of 2023. She is currently working on her next novel. When she isn't writing, Joanna enjoys theater, baseball, and bookmarking recipes that she will never make. As a child of the 80s, she regrets that she no longer receives pizza coupons in exchange for reading. I need to ask you about that. So if you guys have any comments or questions, because I love to get questions from our Bookish Road Trip audience, please put them in the comments below, and also add your name because sometimes we cannot always see who we're talking about. So without further ado, I want to hear all about this book. Joanna, can you give us a brief synopsis about your book?
Sure. So Something Better, I like to say, is a tale of love, family, and the dangers of attending your high school reunion. And it follows the story of Corinne Fuller, who is a wife and mother in her 40s, who is at odds with herself. Her daughter is about to enter senior year in high school, is looking towards leaving home. Corinne has been caring for her mother, who recently passed away. So she is sort of left at this point in her life without direction. And she keeps wondering, what if? Where did I go wrong? And what's next? And she ends up going back to her high school reunion reluctantly with her best friend, and has a chance encounter with the boy who broke her heart. And things sort of snowball from there without giving too many spoilers away. Some decisions have to be made, and some choices have ramifications. And and the reader gets to come along for that whole journey and see what happens.
Well, like I said, I love this book. And the very beginning, your inciting incident is obviously a class reunion. And I loved it because it starts out with an invitation. It says, "Cheers to 25 years, class of 1992. I love it. Go Warriors." That immediately, because I mean, we've all been invited back to our high school reunion. This happens to be a big one, 25. But I was hooked immediately.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad. Well, and I have to throw a little Easter egg out there. Warriors is actually my son's baseball team. So I put them in the book because I wrote quite a bit of this sitting on the sidelines at baseball practice. And a lot of the baseball mamas pitched in and helped me while I was doing writing things. So
yeah, no pun intended. Pitched in.
Right. That's true. Oh, yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig in. I want to talk about your main character, Corinne Fuller. As I told you earlier before we started, she is relatable, but she's also infuriating. But she is also a woman that is grappling with midlife, daughter getting ready to go off to college, but the what ifs of life. Tell me about her. How did you create her? Where did she come from?
It's funny because I really did set out, from the beginning, I knew I didn't want her to be necessarily likable, which is an interesting place to start when you think about writing a book. And just a little sidetrack, I had actually originally envisioned this book as it was going to be 4 points of view told by a group of 4 friends at 4 different high school reunions. So Corinne was going to be one piece of that. She was going to tell the story at the 25th reunion. And then the other 3 reunions were going to be, you would see Corinne through other people's eyes. And so when I started writing, I started with Corinne because she was closest to my own experience, wife, mother, about the same age. And by the time I got about 10,000 words in, I couldn't leave her. I was like, well, I have to see where she's going. So, the other characters are still in the book, but it's her story now. So that's kind of where she came from. And I really stuck to my guns that I did not everyone's going to like her, and that I was going to be okay with that. I wanted her to be relatable, if not always likable. That was my goal for her. So that's where she came from.
And she's so relatable. And I read somewhere where you said that every villain believes they're the hero in their own story, and she's not a villain, so we're not going that far. But she does make some interesting choices along the way.
Yeah. And she really, and we all do. We see our lives through our own lenses, and we don't always realize that everyone else's story is playing out right alongside ours. And we can get very blindsided by the fact that what we do isn't happening in a vacuum. And so that's something she has to come to terms with, that, things have been happening that she doesn't necessarily know about or think about. And, and what happens with that.
Yeah. And this is told in first person POV. So, obviously she's talking to you, but she has something special in the way that she talks to the reader. She has an inner monologue, which I found fascinating. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that? Because you use it throughout the book, and it's very important to her story.
Yeah, I actually, and you and some of the others that I've talked to this week on Bookish Road Trip, we've found there's quite a few of us who used to act or still act. It was that's a little bit something I do. Sometimes I will narrate in my head if I'm doing something. I'm like, oh, and here I am. Here's Joanna, and the star of her, of her sitcom, awkward adulting, So is this idea, I really like this idea that she removes herself sometimes. And again, this idea that heroes and villains, we tell ourselves a story from a specific viewpoint. So this is her telling herself her story, and she's aware that she's doing it, but she's not always aware of how it's playing out to others. Yeah. So it was just a fun way.
And it was also it was kind of like a coping mechanism, because this isn't something that she has had throughout her life. It's fairly a recent development.
It is. I kind of addressed it a little bit. It's not a book about grief, but Corinne, when we meet her, she is grieving. She's grieving. Her daughter is, growing up, and she's going to be an empty nester. She's grieving that her mother has passed away after years. She's grieving, a marriage that she doesn't know if she can save. And so it is sort of a coping mechanism that she employs to deal with this sort of day-to-day grief that she hasn't, fully reconciled.
Yeah. And so we've got Barbara Connery is here with us. We also have a Facebook user, didn't use her name, but she said, you are doing a great job on the takeover. And I told you that earlier, your takeover questions and your graphics, you've really engaged our audience. And we have another Facebook viewer who cannot watch right now. She is, her daughter just invited her out, but she's going to watch us later. So, but let's go back to Corinne. The way you write her relationship with her daughter, it was so authentic, because I have 5 children, I have a daughter, and they need you so much when they're younger, but when they turn into a teenager, they kind of pull away. And I think that, like you said, she's grieving that as a mother, that her daughter's kind of pulling away from her.
Yeah. And it's funny when I started writing this book, because, it takes a while between the idea and writing it and then actually publishing it. I set it in what was the future for me. I was like, well, my daughter was in 8th grade, my son was in 6th. And I thought, well, I'll put them in, I'll put this daughter in high school so that it doesn't sound too similar. Well, by the time the book came out, my daughter was a senior, and I'm like, okay, so I've learned a lesson. If I don't want there to be comparisons, I was like, okay, set it in the past. I've learned. So, but it was very interesting, and the timing was interesting that I was debuting my book at the same time my daughter was graduating high school. So there were a lot of emotions, and launching the book kind of helped me deal with the feelings I had about my own feelings about my first child leaving home. So,
well, you wrote it spot on. I mean, not every daughter and mother have that, but there's always a little underlying tension as they grow up. That's just the way it is.
Sure. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about this reunion. So this is, like I said earlier, this is the inciting moment. This is, at first she's reluctant to go because she is afraid she's going to run into the character of Nick. And I want to discuss him in a minute. Have you gone back to your own high school reunions? Is this what kind of inspired this what if, how my life might be different if I made different choices?
I did. I went to my 10th and I went to my 20th, 20th or 25th, 20th, I think. And I had a lot of fun. The first idea I had for this was at my 10-year reunion. So 20 something years ago. And then it kind of just sat in the back of my head for a while. And that's when I had the idea of doing sort of 4 different reunions in 4 different times in our characters' lives. My reunions were great. I grew up in a small town. I'm still Facebook friends with quite a few of my classmates. I had a great time at my reunions, and I was interested when I put it out there on Bookish Road Trip. There definitely seemed to be 2 camps about how people feel about reunions. So Corinne was definitely on the reluctant, no thanks side of things and gets dragged along.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And
but it was what she needed to kind of kick her into gear to realize, you know what, I have things I could do, look at the people around me, there's still life to be lived.
She's encouraged to go to this reunion by, I have to say it, my favorite character. I loved her best friend, Beth. Talk to me about her.
Beth is everybody's favorite. It's so funny. I'm like, apparently I have to read another book about Beth because she is by far the reader favorite. And she is really, like I said, I wanted to write Corinne a little bit unlikable or at least questionable. You wanted to kind of be like, oh, you had to watch her like this. So you need a character who's going to come in and point out all her terrible behavior. And that's where Beth comes in. Beth is the stress relief for the reader as we watch Corinne set her life on fire.
But in defense of Corinne, yes. She's gone through a lot. She's gone through the grief. She's losing her daughter. And that's the thing that draws you in. She's relatable. Yes, there were some times that I did do this, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But it's such a relatable story. And I think that's why readers are drawn to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to go back to, and that's the beauty of friendship when you have a best friend who will stand by you even when, they don't agree with with maybe your choices, but they're giving you the freedom to, live your life. And so that's where that kind of came from. I wanted to have that friendship that they've been friends for 25, 30 years. That's the kind of person you can call out when need be.
Oh, we've got Annie. Annie has joined us. Hey, ladies. Yes, that is best friend forever. I agree with you. I love the best friend. So let's talk about this reunion. Yes. You describe it. I felt like I was in the gymnasium. I felt like I was there. Felt like my high school reunion with the exception of the alcohol. I lived in a dry county, so we would not have had alcohol at our reunion. Tell me a little bit about how fun it was to create that party scene.
That was that was actually the first scene I wrote when I got this idea, the hanging the tool from the basketball netting or hanging the tool from basketball net was actually the first thing I wrote. talking about the school kind of smelled like pizza and bad decisions. That was,
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with the reunion, and I actually toyed with starting the book there. I went back and forth where it should start, if it should start in the middle, because I had so much fun. I didn't want to leave the reunion.
An- Annie just said, "Oh my, like Footloose." Yeah. So a little,
Yep.
I can kind of envision, the modern version of that. So the person we got to talk about, we got to go into Nick. So he is her first love, and that's the other thing that made her so relatable, because we've all had that first
Yes.
love, and sometimes you look at that love with kind of rose-colored glasses, perhaps. Tell me a little bit about Nick.
Oh, Nick. Yeah, he's that boy or that person in high school that is so dreamy and wonderful. And you just think, oh, this is what romance and love is. And you get a little older and you get a little distance and you look back and you think, oh, maybe, you grow up a little and then you see them again and they have not grown up at all. And it can be charming, for sure, but it can also be what's going on there. Why have we not progressed?
Yeah.
And it can be very distracting. And I loved the idea of, again, going back to heroes and villains, this idea that Corinne reconnects with Nick and who she thinks she is, mainly online and over text, not, in person. So she gets to make up the narrative about who he is to her.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
I found it fascinating because I could see how she could see him in that light,
mhm,
because she's still remembering him as that 18-year-old self, and
mhm.
but as a 52-year-old woman, I'm reading like red flag, red flag, red flag. But I thought that was really interesting because I did sympathize with the way that she was seeing him.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
it's very easy to fill in, like you said, with the rose-colored glasses. Those red flags don't look red if you're wearing the rose-colored glasses, right?
no, not at all.
So, yeah, so she filled in exactly what she wanted to see. And so, you know.
Well, there's one other character I do want to talk about because I really liked Sean, her husband. He was such a supportive husband. How did he develop? Where did he come from?
I It's funny, my husband will say, "Oh, it's me." And I said, "No, no, no."
Yep.
I mean, yes, but no. Yeah, it was funny. I had to have a very uncomfortable conversation with my husband when I started writing this book. I was like, "So I'm writing this book about a woman in her 40s who has an affair with her high school boyfriend, and it's not us." And he's like, "The more you say it's not us, the more it sounds." I said, "But the husband's really nice, so don't worry."
Yes.
I really didn't want to. I wanted to. I didn't want Sean to be a jerk. I knew I didn't want Sean to be a jerk. I knew I wanted him to be maybe a little clueless, maybe a little, living his own story on his own parallel path and not seeing what's going on. But I wanted him to just be nice. And so that was him. I wrote a nice guy.
And he was a really nice guy.
Yes.
So I want to switch gears just a little bit. We're going to come back to your book, but I love to do kind of deep dives. If the authors have been so kind to give us your week and all of what you have to put into Author Take the Wheel, I do a little deep dive on you guys. And I love your website, by the way. It's one of the best author websites out there. Can you tell everybody real quick what it is so they can follow it?
Sure. It's joannamonahan.com.
Okay.
Yeah, just
It's
straight up joannamonahan.com.
Love it. But so I found it interesting that you have a Spotify playlist for your book. And I want you to tell me a little bit about it because some of the songs on it, after reading the book, I'm like, perfect. Take Me On, Crazy for You, which is an all-time favorite. I Don't Know Much, and Constant Craving, which is kind of, I could just hear that now after thinking about your book, it's on a loop in my mind. Talk to me about how music played a role in this.
So I actually started when I started writing this. I was over on Instagram and I joined a writing challenge. And there was a writing challenge where every day for 14 days you posted a snippet of your book and a song that went with it. And so I actually, it was the Whip soundtrack challenge. And so that's where I was in the middle of edits and adding songs to the book or finding the ones, because I'd written a few in for like the reunion, actually really helped me kind of focus the story and where I wanted to go with it. And the title of my book, Something Better, is actually from a song by The National called Start a War. And the first line of the song is, we expected something better than before.
Which is perfectly sums up this book.
Yes.
I love that, because I actually, not with my second book, but with my first book, I created a playlist that it would help me, inspire me to get me into those moods. And it's amazing what music can do and how it can really help you creatively.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am actually going to put on Spotify too. I'll put it in my notes tomorrow, but I'm going to do a playlist of all the songs that everybody recommended the other day from the high school songs. So there will be a playlist out there, a Bookish Road Trip playlist.
I absolutely love that. And you and I bonded a little bit on Debbie Gibson. I mean, who doesn't love Debbie Gibson?
I mean, Electric Youth, come on.
Tiffany, my husband says I have terrible taste in music, but that was my youth. And a little, Def Leppard in there too. But Debbie Gibson was really, she had my heart.
Yes, I practiced so hard to learn that dance.
So Annie just said, it helps you experience a book deeper with music. I totally agree with that. And Barbara was like, how fun. So I also want to talk about your website, because you blog. And as a writer, sometimes after we get published, we kind of forget about blogging, but you are very, very active on your blog. And I loved it. Your latest blog had two things that stuck out to me. One, let's talk about your cat. These are things you learned. You said your cat went viral for like 5 seconds. Please tell me more.
Oh my gosh, my cat. So my cat is Carrot, and I can't believe you haven't heard him. He's like, I've got the door closed to the office and he hates that. So he's just this massive chunk of a cat. And he's usually my writing buddy, usually right next to me. And so I started putting him in pictures because he wouldn't move to get out of them. And I took a video of him. He was staring down my mother-in-law's cat one time when they came to visit. And I put the little theme song to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly as they were staring at each other, put it out there. And 17,000 views within like a day. And I was like, and how hard you work on those posts and those,
Mm-hmm.
You write these really thoughtful posts and get 2 or 3, responses to it. But anytime I put my cat in a video.
I feel like you're my twin from North Carolina, because the same thing happened to me. I worked so hard on a reel or a post, and you get some likes in here or there.
Mm-hmm.
I saved a dove that literally got stuck in my garage. My son was at home taping it because I was holding it because the dove let me. And it was the most liked video and watched video I've ever had.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just by accident.
It's nice. It puts you right in your place. It just reminds you like, okay.
Yes. So the other thing about that blog, and I'm going to read this, is that you said it was things that you've learned. And you said, when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. So it was easier to keep going. Now that I have more experiences, it's easier to get stuck in my head over things I know I should do. That is, it was an aha moment. Tell me a little bit about that.
Every year I do a little roundup of things I didn't know. Because I came to writing sort of without any formal training. I just thought, I'm going to try this and I'll learn along the way. So every year I do a roundup. And this year, that was the big thing I realized, is that now that I know a little bit more about the craft and writing, I am having a harder time when I get into edits, because I know certain things I should be hitting, or beats I should be hitting, or things I need to address, or now I know about theme. And it was easier when I didn't know all of that. Or was at least, I don't know if easier is the right word. It was faster. So I have had to learn to trust myself, to let go of the fear that I'm doing it wrong, in order to do it at all. And I also have found it's easier because I know where to ask for help when I need it. So it does even out. The things that get harder also get easier in equal amounts, I've found.
Well, the other thing I want to talk about, kind of, you know, with that same theme is, this is your debut novel. And the thing I love so much about Bookish Road Trip is we have so many, excited readers who want to know about publishing, but we also have, aspiring writers or other authors. And everyone is very curious about how you went from, this idea to being a published author. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. So I didn't get serious about writing until about 2019. I had dabbled in it. I'd done some NaNoWriMos. I had actually written a YA book manuscript that I didn't really do much with. I queried for a couple of months before I realized, what, this is not where I want to stay. So I worked on my book. I worked with a writing coach who helped me realize that I was writing women's fiction. And we worked together through 2019, 2020, 2021. And I wrote the book in about 3 or 4 months during 2020 when I suddenly had a whole lot of time. So I got my first draft done very quickly, edited it, and started querying that fall. And it took about a year. And it was just rejection after rejection. I got a couple of fulls, but it didn't go anywhere. And I got to the point where I thought, well, maybe this isn't the one. I did get some feedback that said, this is a tough heroine to start your career with. Maybe try again, and then make this like your second or third book. And so I really thought I was going to start something else. And then a friend encouraged me to try again. And this time I focused on smaller traditional publishers that didn't require an agent. And that's when I ended up finding a home at Blue Ink Press, which is a small woman-owned traditional press that focuses on North Carolina authors.
I love that. And what was it like when you got that email, or when you got that phone call? What was that like?
Oh my gosh, it was surreal because I had the day before gotten a rejection with some very thoughtful feedback in it from another publisher and I had read it and I processed it and I thought, you know what? Okay, this is my sign. I need to step back away from this. So the next day I got this wonderful email saying, we would like to talk to you. and I thought, well, they're going to have some feedback for me. And instead we had a really lovely phone call and they made an offer on my book. So it just goes to show, when people say it's subjective, it really is. It really is. And you can't give up hope when you still have it. So.
Absolutely. And so from the time you signed your contract, because other people are very curious about how long it actually takes to get a book to market, from the day that you signed your contract to the day of your release, how many months or year and a half, how long was that?
It was 10 months. We were very quick, actually, because they're a smaller press. So they really do about one a season. So I was summer 2023. So I signed in August of 22 and debuted 2023, which was lovely because it was my bookish bucket list. Number one goal was to publish before I was 50, and I made it with 4 months to spare.
I absolutely love that. And before we go, because unfortunately I could sit here and talk to you all day, but I do have to be wrapping this up pretty soon. But I just want to show everyone this cover again. I love this cover. Can you tell us do you have a lot of input on this?
I had some input. I did send them some ideas, which they actually used. I had suggested something with the hands, and they're holding hands in the front. She's looking away. But the color scheme I could have never envisioned. I am not a purple person, and I cannot tell you how much I love purple now. I love that cover so much.
Well, I love it too, because, and you're very active on social media, and you can tell you you have a brand. It's everything is very cohesive, and so it definitely draws you in. But before we end this today, I know people are going to want to follow you. Could you tell them about where they can find you on, the socials, Instagram, Facebook?
Yes. Yeah, I am at Joanna Monahan Author on Instagram, which is probably where I'm most active, but I am also at Joanna Monahan Author on Facebook if Instagram is not your thing. I understand. And then you can find me just Joanna Monahan on Goodreads or on my website, joannamonahan.com.
Well, real quick before we end, we've got some more comments. Barbara Connery says, I cannot believe you are 50. Did I hear that correctly? And she's also thanking you. And Annie says, congratulations. And a lot of people are going to watch this later. So if you please comment, because, Joanna and I will come on here and we will answer more questions. But this has been an incredible week. I am so sad to see you go, but we still have you one more day. But before you go, what are you working on next?
So I am just wrapping up revisions on my sophomore novel. It's called Welcome to Blooms. And this one is a little lighter. It is about a brother and a sister, Daisy and Bud Bloom, who have to come together to save the family flower shop.
Okay, loving everything about it, loving the names as well. And now, are you with the same press, or are you somewhere else?
I am actually going to go out and I'm going to be querying. I'm hoping to find agent representation for the second one. So we will see where I go from here. Yeah.
Well, if you need an advanced reader, count me in. So I am a fan, and thank you so much. So I just want to remind everyone, next month, our author Take the Wheel is going to be on March 14th with Diane Barnes, and we're going to discuss her book, All We Could Still Have. So excited about that. But to everyone who has commented and keep commenting, thank you. And until next time.
Bye, guys. Thank you.